Well, we're joined now in our Canberra studio by Federal Environment Minister Tony Burke. Mr Burke, I understand you have an announcement to make on the super trawler. Tell us what that's about.
The super trawler came back with what they regarded as a compromise proposal, which was that the trawler wouldn't put out its own net and it would operate essentially as a giant refrigerator in the ocean, and smaller trawlers would go off and come back to it as some sort of mothership arrangement. I asked my department for advice on, first, was it a new fishing activity, and secondly, environmentally, did it raise, even though it was a very different method, did it raise the same sorts of problems as last time? I've now gone through that departmental advice in the last couple of hours and have determined that yes, it's a new fishing activity, and yes, even though it looks like a compromise on the face of it, a whole lot of the environmental problems that we had last time are replicated again under this so-called compromise model. So I've initiated the process tonight to go through the different methods of consultation that have to happen before I can go ahead with a fresh ban on the new proposal for the super trawler.
So are you saying that you are going to ban it outright?
I've started the first stage of that tonight. There's about 3 steps I have to go to. First is to get agreement from the Minister for Fisheries. Second is to give them a 6-month notice period, a 6-week notice period where the company gets a natural justice opportunity to respond. And then at the end of that, the option is there for a further 2-year ban on the additional proposal that they've had. But effectively, even though it sounds like, oh, they're not putting the net out, maybe there's not a problem, for the device that came back for seals and dolphins and localised depletion, the problems that arise are exactly the same. For seabirds, the problems that arise are potentially worse. So while on the face of it, it might not make for as bad images when they're not throwing that giant net out, my concern is, does the environment benefit from that sort of compromise? And all the advice I've had now says no.
And are you concerned about a potential legal action from the Dutch company that owns the super trawler, because they've certainly threatened that in the past?
They've threatened that in the past. They've told me directly that they may well go down that pathway. From my perspective, this government has taken a highly cautious view on when it comes to the ocean. We're very committed to making sure we have proper protections and safeguards in for the ocean. And as long as there's a significant environmental risk and the scientific work hasn't been done, I'm not going to have a view that says we'll just go out, let them fish and see where it lands.
If I can just move on to the issue that's dominated Canberra today, and that is the mining tax, particularly the design of the tax. Was your government, in your view, too generous in the tax deductions it offered the miners to get a deal done?
I think at the core of what's happened with the reduction in revenue is the reduction that's happened in commodity prices.
But hold on a minute, if I can just hold you up on that particular point, because it's been raised a couple of times. But the fact of the matter is, when you're talking about iron ore, for instance, prices are up some 80% since the floor was reached in September last year. They're back to $150 or thereabouts a tonne. So that issue alone clearly isn't to blame here.
Well, I don't think today's value on the iron ore price will be reflected in the taxation revenue that's been published so far. There's always a lag on the revenue figures. I don't have the precise dates as to what the first 6 months refers to, but today's price would be incidental to that and long after it. I mean, from the end of 2011 to 2012...
But so are you saying the structure of the tax has nothing to do with the lost revenue?
No, the structure of the tax is meant to be a super profits tax. Now, when commodity prices come down, you don't get the same super profits. When commodity prices...
My direct question was about the tax deductions offered to the miners. I asked you, did you think they were too generous in hindsight?
Look, and we've got, as you've played in the intro to this, we've got no plans for changing that. The issue of...
But you're not answering my question.
Well, I was about to at that point. The deductions for the miners is something where we took the view that it was the right policy call, that was a genuine investment that they were making at the time, and therefore to be offset against the tax. There was a good policy reason for us reaching that conclusion.
The design of this tax, of course, helped destroy Kevin Rudd's leadership. Today, Mr Rudd made the point, and I quote him, "No government should ever take a backward step in pursuit of the national interest." In your view, did the government take a backward step in its negotiations with the miners?
No, I don't believe we did. I don't believe we did. And if there's any view that somehow we've been scared to have arguments with the miners, then we're forgetting the last 2 years of history with the discussions on the carbon price. So we've been quite willing to stand up for the national interest and be able to have those arguments when we think it's right. When you make a policy call on what's a genuine tax deduction, the policy call we made, we believe had good policy foundations.
Do you still think it does?
Yeah, I do.
Do you welcome Mr Rudd's contribution to this debate?
Yeah, I've been asked about this a few times, and you know, my view is he's not just any old member of Parliament, he's a former Prime Minister. He's going to have views in the public debate, and what he's been saying and the comments he's been making have been, you know, quite consistent with government policy. I know that there'll always be a microscope put over every syllable that he puts forward, but for the life of me, I can't see why there's a problem with him going out and advocating on these sorts of issues.
All right, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in for us.
Good to be with you.